Hello again and welcome back to the Excel VBA series that I'm producing. Today's video is going to look in a bit more detail at different types of loops that we can run, and specifically a loop to get some data which has perhaps been output by a database. So here's a copy of some CSV data, and you'll notice that there's lots of garbage at the top there which the system has generated before my actual data starts. And so here my data starts and it runs all the way down, and what I'm going to do is just come down here, because partway down through the data there's actually a second set of data that begins. Now this could be variable length. We don't know how many items there are in here, so we can't just simply say go to cell 690 in column A, because it might be 692 for one report or 697 for a different report. So we just don't know. So what we have to do is we have to actually run a loop through this data, and in order to do that I'm just going to have a look at this data in Excel. So here's that same data source in Excel, and we have a few more commands that we can use here. So one of them is control down to get to the bottom of that particular set of data, and then we come down here. Now the common thing is just above the start of the data there's a header which is called date. So when I go back up to this one, there's a header called date. So I can use that as a reference point for how I find the start of my data. And actually from date, what I can do is control asterisk, and that will select all of the range of data that I actually want to copy and paste into my actual worksheet. So you see how that's selected that entire range of data but nothing else. So those are the commands that I'm going to use, and we're going to go into this workbook here, the same one that we were working on before, the message box, and we've got a new worksheet called Finding Data Range. Now I'm going to write the code on this sheet here. So it's going to be a module, and if you notice up here, it's the one that's a message box, and it's going to be module 2 in here, and we're going to call it Get My Data. So it's going to be sub for a subroutine, Get My Data, and that's the start of our routine. Now in this routine, what we need to do first of all is we need to change to the other file. So we need to go to that file there. So actually the way we do that in the VBA is we activate that workbook. So workbooks, and the name of that is data source, but it is CSV, and we do need to type in the extension. So for people who've got used to not seeing the extensions, you do need to type in the extension, and we also need to have this workbook open for this to work. So workbooks, data source, activate. And equally on the worksheets, data source, activate. So the worksheet in that particular workbook is also called data source. See, the only reason I've done that is to be bulletproof. If it's come from a CSV file, it's only going to have one sheet in it anyway, so I don't need to specify the sheet. And actually, you can leave that line out if you don't want to run the risk of having an error. Right, now what we're going to do is within that worksheet we're going to select cell A1. So it's range A1 select. And now here's we're going to do the start of our first loop. Now in this, in fact let's test this just to make sure, because what it's going to do is it's going to change to the other workbook and select cell A1. So that'll also let us see what we're doing. So you notice how it's changed to the other workbook and it's selected cell A1. Now what we can do is run our loop, and what we want to do is we want to go down to the cell below and keep going down to the cell below until the date or the value of that cell is actually the text date. So let's go back in there and we're going to do a loop. So do a loop, but we want to do this loop until a certain value is met. So we're going to do until, and it's coming up with that because it's saying until what, and I'm going to come down here and say loop. So do until, we'll call it active cell, active cell dot value equals date. So what it's going to do is it's going to keep going down until the active cell, in other words, each time it's selecting a cell down, until the cell's value is date. Now inside here, what we need to do is have the bit of code that makes it go down a cell at a time. So here we're going to say active cell, and this time it's offset, and we don't want to offset any columns across, but we do want to offset rows down. Now this is the other way around to the normal way for defining a cell, where we say A1 for that cell. This time we talk about the rows first of all and then the columns, and we use both as numbers. So this is going to be the row offset is going to be 1 and comma 0. So I want to be offset 1 row down, no columns across. And what do I want to do? I want to select that cell. Then it's going to loop again, and it's going to check to see if that cell's value is date. If not, it's going to loop again, and it's going to keep going. I'm just going to put a stop in before the end sub. And if I now run that routine, it runs down until that value is true. So once that value is true, it then doesn't do it again, it jumps over it and continues with my code. Okay, so now in here, once we've found that value, what do we want to do? Well, actually we want to select the range of that value. So it's active cell, and it's the current region, and we want to select it. So the active cell current region select, and then selection.copy. And now what we need to do is we need to change sheets back to the other sheet, and I'm just going to copy that range there. So I'm just coming down here and simply paste it in. Now this is going to be not data source, but it's going to be, and if I look over here, if I'm ever not sure what the workbook's called, it's called message box XLSM. So down here, pick up a whole lot. Message box XLSM activate. The worksheet is not data source. The worksheet is finding data range. And I want to go to cell A1. Didn't like that command there. Active sheet. It's just one sheet that's active, not lots of sheets. So active sheet paste. That's going to paste into my active sheet, which by then will be finding data range and range A1 select. So well, let's try that out and see if it works. So it's copied all that data and it's gone into finding data range, and it's copied that whole range of data, and it was down about 400 lines. Yeah, 435 lines, and it's found that set of data. Now that's all well and good, but that's found this first range of data here. What about the second one? Well, actually this we can use the similar code, so I'm going to go back into that code there, and I'm going to set another type of loop, and this is just going to be a simple for x equals 1 to 2. And now if I come down here and say next x, if you notice over here the data that it's pasted in, down here where it finds the second lot, it has second there, and if I go back into this one, you see it says first where it's pasted that in. So let me just clear all from this sheet so that we know that it's going to be doing it correctly. I'm going to go back into my code and we'll run this code. Now, what you may notice is that it's actually gone back to the first one, and I'll explain just why. What it's doing is it's going down, and when it gets to this do until the active cell value is date, it's then running the loop and doing the active cell offset. Once it gets down to the next x, it goes back up here, do until active cell value equals date. Well, it does immediately, because when the active cell there is still that one, it is immediately saying, yes, I am date. So what we actually need to do is we need to take that line of code there, copy it, and we need to paste it in here. So that needs to be pasted in just there at the beginning of that line there. So outside of this loop, but inside of this loop. Now when we do it, it will pick up the second instance, because immediately it will go down to that one when it starts the next x loop, and then it will run down until it becomes date again. So let's have a go at doing this code. Let's go back and clean that one out again. So I'm going to select all of that and clear all. And now we'll run the code again. And this time it comes up with the second instances. Now it might not be that that's all we want, so I'm just going to clear that all again. And what we might want is we might want the first lot set in there and the second lot set in there, so that we can then turn it into tables perhaps, or into some kind of report. This is slightly more complicated again. What we're going to do is we're going to move this x, the next x, we're going to move down to the bottom here, so that when it finds on the first x, when it finds our first date, it's actually going to get the data straight away from that range and paste it into cell A1. Now what I'm going to do here, slightly different, is I'm going to say active sheet dot cells, and if I just I'll just delete all of that. Active sheets. I'm just looking to see that we are on the actual right sheet. And we're not. Because what we also need to do there is we need to go back to our data source CSV sheet, otherwise it's going to be running the loop on the wrong sheet. So back here I want to go back in and select not A1 but just those two, and down here that is outside of that loop after it's done the paste. So down here after it's done the paste, that's when I want to reactivate the other workbook.
So immediately after it's done the paste, which is in message box, finding data range, I want to change back to the other workbook and then say next X, which goes back up here, and then active cell offset, and then do until date. Okay, so we've got that bit right. Now the next thing we need to do is, when we come down here, what we actually need to do is we need to look at where we're going to paste it into. So within the active sheet, we need to select a certain cell.
So this is going to be
active sheet dot cells, and it's going to be X, 1 dot select. Now, why I'm saying X, 1 is that will then be my active cell. X, 1, when it runs through the X the first time, will be 1. So that will paste it into 1, 1. Now the second one I'm going to paste in, I don't want it to paste into 2, 1. What I actually want to do is I want to paste it, in fact it'll be 1, 2. I want to paste it in over here, so I want to paste it into 5. So let's go and have a look at the code there. Doing that the wrong way around, that's rows. That should be 1, X. Let's talk about the rows and then the columns. So I want to be row 1 and column 1, but I want this to be 5. But I don't want it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want it to jump straight to 5. So I'm going to say step 4. So it's going to jump from 1 to 5 in a step of 4, which will just be a single jump. So X, the first time it runs it, will be 1. So it will paste into row 1, column 1, which is that there, cells 1X. And the second time, X is going to be 5, so it's going to paste into row 1, column 5, which is right over here, column E. And let's see if that works. Okay, so let's just have a look here. This is still data source. It's changed back to the other worksheet, because remember we put that line of code at the bottom. But if I go into my message box, there's my first set of data, there's my second set of data. It's gone into the right place and picked up the correct data. All I need to do is, right at the end here, I could change the sheet back to message box. And that's outside of that X, right before the end of the subroutine. Okay, so if I clean that worksheet off again, go back into my code and run the code. It does take a while, but if you have a look here, that's now my first set of data, and that's my second set of data. Okay, a bit of a complex tutorial there, but very useful, I think you'll agree. Different ways of selecting the data, different ways of copying and pasting it into the sheets, 2 different types of loops we used there, and I hope that's been useful. Any questions, do pop me a message down below and I'll try and help. And thank you for listening.